5-1 Bears fans, 5-1. Welcome into the Bearfront Hurry Up Recap right here on ShyCitySports.com, part of the Shy City Sports Podcast Network. I'm Steven Johnson. He is Nick Bidding. And Nick, it feels good. It feels like it couldn't have been any better of the day. The Bears come away with a victory. The Packers get their asses handed to them by the Buccaneers. The Bears are in first place in the NFC North. Oh, what a Sunday. What a way to start the week.
It was a really good Sunday. I think we both picked the Bears to win this game, but I think it actually felt better of a win than I think we had it probably predicted insofar as it felt more comfortable. I think we both had the game within 3 or 4 points, and this game didn't feel that close at times. So it was a good win and a good Sunday.
Yeah, it's overall the defense came to play today. It was amazing just from the get-go. The way that they controlled the game, the bend don't break, the red zone defense that showed up today in Carolina. You could have not asked for a better performance in the red zone today from the Chicago Bears, and Chuck Pagano doing a hell of a job running that unit. And again, you kind of mentioned it there, is today felt like a normal football game.
Yes.
And it felt like there was no grasping at straws. There needs to be some miracle. None of that. It felt like the game never seemed out of hand for the Bears, maybe with the exception of a very, very close overthrown ball to DJ Moore in the fourth quarter when the Panthers were only down by 7. However,
that happens every week in every game. I mean, Rodgers missed a wide open tight end. I mean, that's just part of football.
Right. You know, it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. I know a lot of people, myself included, can say the officiating today also had
oh my God,
plenty of shortcomings. I think that's the best way to put it, is shortcomings. It's rather funny as well, because we saw a couple of Bears defensive players, specifically Danny Trevathan among them, kind of voice out after the game on social media, talking about how they're not letting the team play. A couple plays that come to mind: a Jalen Johnson pass interference that's
the
led
big one
to the only Panthers touchdown of the day, when in reality, I mean, I don't know what else you can expect a guy to do in that scenario. Kyle Fuller laying another massive hit on, and I guess they call it a defenseless receiver. I mean, he didn't lead with the head.
That's the one where the rule sucks. And
yeah,
that's the thing, is like, the rule just sucks. The officials have to call that and have to penalize it. That's not the officiating. That's the league giving the officials no out. That's just a really crappy rule. If you complain about that, you're complaining about the rule. I get that. The Johnson defensive pass interference is just terrible. There was hand fighting. I mean, that's just the way you teach it. And you saw when he came off the field right after that, is everyone's basically telling him to do the exact same thing every time. Just keep playing it like that. That's just a terrible call. I get that everyone's upset about the Fuller hit. That's a bigger issue. That's just a bad rule. I get it. No one likes that rule. It's not a BS call by the letter of the law. The law just sucks.
I still think it's a BS call.
The way the rule's written, it was the right call. The rule just sucks.
I mean, it was literally a steps difference from what he did against the Bucks. Mm-hmm. Legit, a step, and it's like, like it sucks. It sucks because you love seeing that tenacity out of the secondary. Tayshaun Gibson, Eddie Jackson, both having a hell of a day as well. Getting a pick six called back, which
that's the second time this year, right? Where we had a pick six call back on a guy getting the like microseconds early.
It's really splitting hairs to an extent, and it's funny because you watch some of the other games, and across any time that I can, I'll check in with Red Zone and just see what games are happening there when it's bouncing around, and it's amazing just watching how many plays, and even in the later games, in the Jets and the Dolphins, as well as the Packers and the Bucks, uh, there's really not a consistency to the timing and the pass interference calls right now
No.
with as close as things have been. Buster Screen, I believe last week there was a really close one, even to one where it's like, really? Like you couldn't even really call it pass interference. I don't know what the issue has been, and I know that Packer fans can even cry foul about penalties and non-calls today. I believe there was a Twitter blow up over a Buccaneers player being off sides on the pick six, which beautiful play, as we all know.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what it is with the officiating this year, but it's so inconsistent, and
It is.
it's
It's
not
really
just the Bears games.
and you see it, especially on those judgment calls. It feels like we've said this for years, though. Now, I mean, the OPI DPI stuff is just you can't play defense anymore. The league wants points, so you've legislated the type of stuff that Jalen Johnson was doing out of the game. That's just hand fighting. 5-10 years ago, that's not called. That's just a great play. What always you knew it was a clean play because DJ Moore didn't even get up and complain right away. It was actually a late flag, and the Panthers wide receiver didn't even complain about the call. And then the flag came out, and I was confused as to what it was for. I thought the camera pans so quick. I thought maybe they're going to get Johnson for riding him out of bounds or riding him to the sideline too hard. But when I rewatched it, it was just two guys hand fighting. Johnson, they were both kind of grabbing each other's arm, and then the flag comes out. And if you actually look at that replay, the official watches the play through to fruition, and the ball falls incomplete, and then he pulls the flag late. It's just, I agree. The consistency on OPI and DPI is terrible. The stuff with the Fuller hit, I get, people are going to say, we were talking to Zach in the chat during the game, is, the Panthers wide receiver is going to go by Fuller. What's he supposed to do? The law says you have to let him complete the process of the catch and then hit him. Now, I don't know how you're supposed to judge that in real time. But
You
that's
can't.
to my
That's
point.
that's the thing.
And that's my point. It's a terrible rule.
Right.
The league has handcuffed the officials on stuff like that. I get that. OPI and DPI, that's judgment calls that the officials are just constantly making bad judgments on.
Yeah, and here's the thing too is I get that they're different in terms of the violence or the violent nature of each one in terms of Fuller, just lowering that shoulder, and I mean I wish he would do it every week. I love watching it.
And the rule
Honestly,
is ambiguous because people. Well, it was like, for example, I know there was a lot of discussion on Twitter. Well, he didn't hit him in the head. Well, the way the rule reads is head or neck area. Where does your neck area stop? Is it your collarbone? Is it mid shoulder? Where's your head or neck area technically end? So if Fuller goes shoulder to shoulder with him and he hits you more in the clavicle, is that technically your neck area, but also your? That's why I'm saying the rule sucks.
I mean, yeah, and as we all know,
area end, is it here? Is it here? Is it here? I mean,
right,
where?
Right, and unfortunately, it's open all too much to each official having their own idea of it. And again, in real time, we know it's difficult sometimes, but at the same time, let the guys play. And I love that the physicality is finally getting out in this team. The defensive line got after Teddy Bridgewater today. That was great watching.
That was awesome to see.
that whole front seven just get after it. They bottled up Mike Davis for the majority of the day. I believe he was under 3 yards a carry. He salvaged his day with that touchdown on that little scamper there. It's great to see things slowly start to build up on that side of the ball, regardless of how the penalties may have fallen today.
And that's the thing. I understand the calls went, against the Bears a few times, but really the defense today, and even to an extent last week, has now started to do what we've been asking them to do on this show for a while is, look, if you want to be a great defense, you need to make game-changing plays and be dynamic. In the last couple of weeks, we've started to see the undercurrent of that. And I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden now the Bears are winning football games in this week especially, and you kind of amalgamate it with last week, but this week, like really officially, this felt like, given all this team's limitations on the offensive side of the football, this felt like a somewhat sustainable way that this team can win football games. You have a really good defense, borderline on great, now creating turnovers, giving your offense short fields, getting points out of it. And now you have your pass rush showing up, and those things start to come together. And this week felt like the first time for a complete game all year that this is how this team's going to be able to win football games in a sustainable, repeatable fashion.
Absolutely. And it's nice to have your most complete game as a defensive team going into the most difficult stretch of your season. Again, the Rams Monday night next week, the Saints the week after, and then the Titans. So 3 games that are looming large on the schedule, despite the fact that the Rams are currently getting their butts handed to them on Sunday Night Football by the Niners, and it's sure looking like the Rams definitely padded their record with 4 wins against the abysmal NFC East, and are finally realizing some decent competition. So we're hoping that means that the Bears can kind of continue to shove them aside and show that they aren't, on the same course as the NFC East. But we'll see what happens in 8 days' time once that matchup does take on. The 3rd straight year, I believe, the Bears will be taking on the Rams. For whatever reason, we just can't get away from them. But
hopefully it's a prettier football game than the last 2, because God,
the last 2 have been rough. It's and as we all know, the Bears offensive line will have their hands full with Aaron Donald, regardless of how well the Rams play, because
I'm trying not to think about that matchup right now.
It's not something that anybody, I think, in Bears fandom wants to look forward to. But before we look too far down the road, the other side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball, started out relatively okay.
It was all right.
Looked like there was the opportunity to flirt with 30+ points at one point. I will say the first possession. I mean, I believe Nick Foles started 16 of 17, if I'm not mistaken. It was something
like that.
And to see that connection, despite the fact their first possession, defense sets them up well. They got 1st and goal. You come out, you get your first play off, you call a timeout, you come back, you get a delay of game, and just more chaos, a Carolina timeout, and then Cole Kmet, through a very, very, very narrow window, gets his first touchdown as a professional player in the NFL.
Matt Nagy's terrible. Matt Nagy sucks as a head coach. Like this team is poorly coached, and what did it make? And what we talked about briefly before we went on, what didn't make sense in that entire sequence either is you're in the red zone, you pulled Jimmy Graham off the field, you call a timeout, put him back on the field in the red zone, then you get the delay of game and take him back off the field, and he's probably, I would say, inarguably this year, your best red zone weapon. Maybe you could probably make a case for Allen Robinson, but I feel like Graham has been more dynamic in the red zone this year. Either way, he's either 1A or 1B in the red zone for you. I think we can all at least agree to that.
I agree.
Why is he not on the field? And what the hell is going on? How do you get a delay of game out of a timeout? There should be no confusion.
I don't know. That just blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind that you had an additional 30 seconds to figure out what you wanted to do, plus the 40 seconds on the game clock. And you just couldn't figure it out. Like nothing in my mind.
After the delay of game, they went back to the original play call from the timeout. because it was the same personnel package, same pre-snap motion, everything. They went back to the original play call. So what the hell is going on?
I don't know. It was but I mean, between that, I don't feel there have been so many just boneheaded penalties, just complete boneheaded penalties. I mean, that one. I mean, it was the first one of the game, but it was the cherry on top of just a day of, you know, listening last week to Matt Nagy and saying the details matter and getting the small things right matter. They didn't get a whole lot of the small things right today.
No.
They just didn't. Yeah, you have two penalties for 12 men on the field. You get the delay of game. Uh, the offensive line, specifically Charles Leno, no idea what he's doing out there. It,
He
it
doesn't either.
it's
Okay.
it's getting bad. It is getting real bad, and I'm scared to death of a couple of the games that the Bears have coming up, and worrying about the turnstile he's become. Um,
If I'm the
it's
Rams, I play Aaron Donald at defensive end against Charles Leno. I just move him to the outside.
yeah, it's I tell you, for saying again that the details and the small things matter, it doesn't feel like it was something that was really focused upon. And the thing that aggravates me the most about this, and again, we can say, they're a poorly coached team. They need to get all these things right to an extent. Yes, that is absolutely correct. No doubt in my mind. However, I still feel as though the reason the Bears are where they are to an extent is because the players still have some strange, odd belief in what Matt Nagy is telling them, which I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, how they can listen so well on one thing, but not on another, because it feels like the two things should be among the same damn playing field in terms of what you should do and what you should be executing on the field.
I agree. I'd really like to see what he's, because whenever we hear Nagy talk publicly, it never makes sense. And I'm gonna date myself on this, but there was an old SNL skit where Phil Hartman played Ronald Reagan, and he played that kind of this bumbling, very old grandpa guy publicly, and then as soon as the door shut, he was this evil mastermind, and he was pulling people into the room and consolidating power and being very clever. I feel like that has to be what Matt Nagy's like behind closed doors, because whenever I hear him talk publicly, I just want to stop listening to him talk publicly.
I will say though, the Matt Nagy presser was kind of but Nick Foles today, and what he had to say, he said some things that was a little not quite, but just seeing the type of person he is, I think it's something definitely that the Bears need. And they just need to kind of rally around more than not necessarily focusing so much on what Nagy is preaching, but also to the point of what Nick Foles is doing on the field as that leader
Well,
to get them together.
that was our point 2 weeks ago, or yeah, 2 weeks ago now, when they made the change and they named
Right.
Foles the starter. You need to. My issue with that, whatever, name whoever your starter is, but name him for the rest of the year, because I don't feel the Bears have officially done that. Is now maybe they have behind closed doors, and that's the understanding behind closed doors. Fine,
But
cool.
why go back? Why go back though?
Exactly. So my point is, if that's been said behind closed doors, I 100% agree with it. But my thing is if it hasn't been done, either outside publicly or not publicly, you need to do it. If this team needs to know what its personality is, who its leader is, and they need to be able to rally around that. And I feel that's possibly a place where Nagy's fallen really short. Now, what I will say this week, what I thought was interesting, I think this is the first week since the whole Trubisky benching that we didn't see any shots of him on the sideline at all at any point. And I keep going back to whenever you watch Nagy and Foles interact on the sideline, you really feel like this is who Nagy wanted all along. And I know you and Zach and I have joked about this. Is I can't wait for the oral history in like 2 to 3 years about how the only reason Trubisky started the season was because Pace pushed for it and Nagy didn't want it at all.
I mean, it's very possible that we do get that. Given the fact we're currently, we've been in the midst of the 2017 history of the draft. But I will say this though, and just gonna repeat a couple of the lines that Nick Foles. I don't know if you saw the presser
No.
after the game. Just the energy and just the way that he brought himself to the press conference, it felt different. It felt like a guy that the Bears have not had in a long time, because as we all know, that when Mitch was starting, when he was the one doing these pressers, he was kind of timid. And he'd say the right things, and he'd, you know, come up with the quotes, but nothing in terms of how he projected himself felt like what Nick Foles looked like today following the game. He said, right now we have a lot of areas to improve offensively. Once again, we're figuring out ways, to score and get points, move the ball and do those things. We can fix what we're doing. It doesn't happen overnight, as we all know. Offenses don't get fixed overnight, and sometimes they don't get fixed through the course of years. You see that in the NFL. As we know, we're on year and a half now where the Bears have kind of sputtered into this thing. So again, not wrong. But this, he says, there have been teams that have been bad offensively for a very long time. We're not one of those teams. I
Mm, disagree.
uh like I feel as though I'm happy about the confidence that he has
Yeah.
as a
Statistically, he's
player.
just wrong. The Bears have been a below average offense for nearly 2 years now. I
Right,
mean,
right. But I mean, let's be frank. This has always been a defensive first team. It
mhm,
always will be. The way that this team is built, that's just who they are. Is if they can keep from turning the ball over, they can take advantage of the opportunities that the defense allows them to get,
mhm.
and the defense just clamps down. Honestly, today was a textbook game in that regard.
Yep.
Outside of the penalties, this is a team that can win football games. It's
Yeah.
not going to be pretty every week, as we have learned, but they do enough to get the job done. The one thing I do feel they're missing, as we thought was going to be something that should have come back today, given the fact that Carolina sucks against it, is the run. And
The offensive line just sucks, and I don't think that's
y-
going to change this year. I just
yeah,
that's your team. That's your offensive line. It's not good.
yeah. I mean, David Montgomery, not the greatest game on the ground for him, averaging just a little over 3 yards a carry, 19 carries, 58 yards. Did have 4 catches for 39 yards in the passing game. He did have a couple very key catches
Mhm.
in this game. It's great to see him get more involved in the passing game, but I tell you, the offensive line needs to get more done for David Montgomery to make his moves and allow himself to get into space, break tackles, which we all know he was very good at doing at, and just be a productive guy that's picking up 4 or 5 yards each carry. And right now, the holes are few and far between for what the offensive line is allowing for the running game as a whole.
This offensive line is what it is.
Yeah.
The Leno and Massey aren't going to get better. Your interior has regressed. We beat that horse to death. That's the scary part. Is between Whitehair and Daniel, you thought you had something. Obviously, Daniel being out, out. That's kind of that ship now has sailed for this season. Just I think your offensive line is what it is. I think the biggest thing the offense can do to improve the rest of the year is try to use Montgomery. You almost have to use the run game, not trick play. That's not the right terminology for it, but you have to use it counter draw, kind of catch the defense off guard with it, and help your offensive line out in that regard. I think we can both agree too. One of the things that offense can do to get better is just not play Anthony Miller as much. That would help a heck of a lot.
I mean, that was a top three play for me today. Watching him have the first down, turn around, try and make something more that wasn't there, and lose the
Every,
first down,
every
killing the play.
single week, there's a play. Now I get it.
Yeah.
He has a couple big catches this year, but every single week there's just a dumb play he makes. And at some point, like we've talked about, maybe that's just who he is. And if that's who he is, give more stabs to Mooney.
And
Where's Ridley? I don't
uh,
know. You drafted him. You keep telling us you're excited about him. Where's Wins? Give us some of that.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
if
no,
those guys
no.
are worse than Miller in practice, good God, that's not good.
Demetrius Harris had 3 targets today. Wins and Ridley had none. They had none. I I will say this though. There was a comment earlier, I think somebody left, that said the Bears still don't have a number 2 receiver. I think Darnell Mooney is that guy. He has shown on several fronts that he has intangibles that you don't normally see with
Mm-mm.
rookie wide receivers, and he
No.
has stepped up in numerous occasions this year and has performed well. I mean, today, not the greatest line, 3 catches, 36 yards. He had 5 targets. Again, I think that if you give this guy a few more opportunities, he's not going to let you down the same way that we saw Anthony Miller let the Bears down over his first 2+ years here in Chicago. And that's all there is to it. Is that there does need to be that guy, and I think they just need to lean on Mooney a little bit more. And yeah, he's a rookie, and maybe that's why they haven't. It wouldn't shock
And his
me at all.
and we talk about it too. Is this is a weird year? No off season. How much of the playbook has he picked up to this point? And there's maybe
Right.
some of that building throughout the year too. So I mean, there's a lot this year that isn't normal, obviously. So maybe that could be part of it. But I think that's maybe your key to a number 2 receiver. And if not, maybe he's a 2.5 now or whatever you want to call it. He's not quite to that point, but I think there's some potential there. He at least plays the game intelligently. Where with the Miller stuff is it just seems like I was saying, it seems like every week there's a play. But also another positive to take from this week is I know I shot you a message when it happened in the game, but I know Foles had a terrible interception, and
Yeah.
that can't happen. But there were a couple throws he made today, specifically one. It was sometime in the first half where he found Robinson on a kind of a smash combination to the
Yeah, to
far
the
side of the
left.
field,
Yeah.
and that is the exact throw, and that's the exact reason Foles is your starter right now. That throw, and I think it was maybe a 15-yard completion. It's not going to look great in the box score, but
It was a
it,
third down completion.
in real time, that's a tough throw over the corner in front of the safety that moves the chains, keeps drives going, and that's a throw Trubisky doesn't make. I don't think Trubisky sees that throw. I think he ends up throwing the deep route that's covered, but Foles made the right read, threw a really difficult ball, completed it easily, and that Bears drive keeps going. So I think when you look at little one-by-one plays, you start to see why Foles is the starter.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair statement. As we all know, Foles doesn't necessarily have the arm strength that Mitch might have. A couple underthrown balls once again
Mm-hmm.
today by Nick Foles, and you're going to have to deal with that inconsistency and knowing what his strengths and his weaknesses are,
Mm-hmm.
and that every once in a while you are going to get that duck, but at the same time you're not necessarily going to get the limitations in terms of the vision and in terms of, again, the pre-snap adjustments, which we saw numerous times today,
Mm-hmm.
that just were not there when Mitch was running this offense. And again, that's again what this team is you have a game manager out there. That's
Mm-hmm.
what Nick Foles is. You can't sit out there and expect him to throw for 300 yards. You can sit out there and expect him to throw for 225, 250, a couple of touchdowns, and hold on to the ball and not make many boneheaded mistakes. Yes, he made one big boneheaded mistake today. That's an easy call out after that turnover. I mean, that had me through the roof. That had me through the roof when that happened, because it shouldn't have happened. That should have been the dagger
Yep.
possession right there, and it didn't happen. I was frustrated. But again, this is the guy that this team needs, and it sucks, as we all know, that things didn't work out, that for whatever damn reason, Ryan Pace 4 years ago chose to trade up one spot and take a guy over 2 other guys that are doing just fine in the NFL right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you work off the mistakes, and thankfully, like anybody can see, especially after today, the Bears have a high caliber defense that can win them games week in and week out against any opponent. Plain
This
and simple.
and I guess the point for today's game is it didn't feel great, but it felt right. It felt
Yeah.
like we were talking earlier. This is the way this team's going to have to win football games. If I felt good after the game, I didn't come away overly impressed, but I was like, all right, this is how this team can win football games week in and week out. Not coming from 20 points behind every week, not with some weird lucky drops in certain situations by the other team or whatever. Between the Tampa Bay game last week and especially today, your defense creates turnovers, short field, creates opportunities. Your offense takes advantage of it, gets out in front, and you kind of ride it out from there. Obviously, we'd all like to see the run game be a lot better and this team turn into like a somewhere between 05 and 06 with a really dominant defense, a good run game, and just good enough passing attack. I don't think we're going to get there on the ground game. I just think this offensive line is too bad. But this game today, to me, is kind of the thesis statement for how this Bears team continues to win football games moving forward. This felt recreatable, and this felt like when you go into the film room, clean up the Foles pick, your offensive line is what it is, but you feel like this team can do this week in and week out.
Right. And like you said, good to have this game happen before the hard stretch of the season here against three opponents who have a very solid record thus far.
Mhm.
Looking like the Rams will be 4-2
Yeah.
after all is said and done. They are currently trailing the Niners 21-9 in the third quarter. So we'll see if that score does indeed hold. Again, the four wins for the Rams this year have come against all four teams in the NFC East. So take with that what you will in terms of how good or how poor this team may actually be. I know a lot of people picked the Rams tonight, and that's not looking so great in that regard. But the Bears, Monday Night Football, 8 days from now, taking on Jared Goff and the LA Rams, or Aaron Donald, whoever you want to say. Aaron Donald's going to be the demon that, that the Bears will have to extinguish, if anybody.
He's just going to set up camp in the Bears backfield. Just expect him to be there all night.
I mean, let's be very thankful that the Rams offensive line ain't that great. They're about on par with the Bears offensive line. So
If he
in
takes
that regard,
a snap from Cody Whitehair, I wouldn't be surprised if he jumps it that quickly and just blows by our interior offensive line. Aaron Donald's going to eat our line's lunch next week. But let's enjoy the win. I'm good with this win. This felt right. Will it work against the great teams league? I don't know, but this win felt repeatable for me, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Hey, repeatable is good.
Yeah.
For as crazy as I felt when we did our schedule show before this season kicked off, and I believe I went, was it 12-4?
Yes.
I feel like that's actually a doable thing at this point in the
And you know what the
season.
funny part is when we did that schedule, I expected every game to go pretty much the way they've gone, but the Bears would just be on the losing side of all of them. And with the exception of today, I'm like, yeah, none of this felt right, but we're 5-1. Cool, let's roll with it. It just went the opposite of the way, every game feel has gone kind of the way I expected it to. It's just the Bears have won them. So hats off to them.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens here. I mean, honestly, 4 more wins. That's it. 4 more wins out of the next 10. And that probably guarantees a playoff spot. Think about that. The Bears can go 4-6. 4-6 over their remaining 10 games, and we could be looking at playoffs. So in the grand scheme of things, not out of the realm of possibility, but we want more than 9-7. We want more than 10-6, because honestly, the Bears are 5-1. We want to see them build upon this. We want to see them win next week at the Rams and just keep this train rolling, and hopefully, in some shape or form, Nick Foles is correct, and this offense finds their footing, gets things rolling, and we get a complete football game. Right?
Offensive line. That's all I'm going to keep coming back to. Foles has more confidence in his offensive line than I do. Offensive line is one of those things to me where everyone's like, "Oh, it'll gel, it'll gel." At this point in the year, you kind of know what you got.
Yeah, trade deadline's in 2 weeks, Ryan Pace. Let's find some targets and fill in the gaps.
Yeah, let's just use the rest of our draft picks up. Let's just use the rest of the draft pick capital.
It hasn't been an issue any other time, so hey, why not now? Well, we will be back on Thursday with a brand new episode of the Bearfront podcast, getting you ready for kickoff on Monday night as the Bears take on the Rams. Be sure
keeping it
to
100
watch
on Wednesday.
Yes, keeping it 100 on Wednesday with Draft Dr. Phil and Shane, the smartest man, Marsaw. That will happen 7:30 Central Time on Wednesday night. So stay tuned for that show as well. They have plenty on tap. Claudio the Barber, Cars Keys. I don't know who their guest is this week. We got to figure out who their guest is, but they had a great guest. They had the art appraiser from Pawn Stars on last week. Diehard Bear fan out in Las Vegas, but they have fantastic guests. And again, you can watch them live on Wednesday or check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, along with the Bearfront as well. Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. You can find everything we have here at Shy City Sports.
And join their Patreon if you're a real glutton for football knowledge. Join their Patreon. They got a bunch of stuff behind the paywall there that's great for football nerds like me. So be sure to check out their Patreon as well.
I believe they're already nearing 300 for the Patreon subscribers. So off and running for the Tape Never Lies Network Patreon there. So check that out as well. And until Wednesday, Thursday, whenever you tune back into Shy City Sports, hope you enjoy your week. Enjoy the fact the Bears are 5-1. They are first place in the NFC North, and Monday Night Football awaits. So until then, he's Nick Bidding. I'm Steven Johnson. Bear down. Enjoy the week.